Hello guys, it's benpaines here.
Go. Oi. Hey guys, benpaines here, and today we're back once again for another video, and this time we are over at PMG Karting in Walsall, which is just outside of Birmingham, and we're going to give a members event a little bit of a go. Now obviously we haven't been here before in a little while. The only other time we came to the track, we did in fact come to a members event in January at the beginning of the year, and we had a lot of fun. So we're just going to jump into this one and see what we're able to do. Now honestly, the format for this one, I genuinely couldn't tell you what was going on, but what you are watching now is in fact a Superpole lap, which then led on to the first of 4 heats that took place on the evening, with points being scored for each one, and obviously the consequenting points then determined our overall position. But with this in mind, we come through on our Superpole lap with a 19.843, which put us 5th place in our group, and now we're going to jump into the first heat. Now before we jump into the first heat, if you do enjoy this video, can you please leave a like on the video down below, as I really do appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel, if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button, as it really does help me out. Now into the first heat we go. You can see we're starting in 5th place. We're looking up the inside of Blake, who started 1 position ahead of us, and we're able to steal 4th place from him. However, as we come back down the ramp, he immediately resends a move down our inside. Very nice clean move down the inside to take 4th position back. Now obviously every lap here at this track is very short and snappy, and it really does make me have to talk quite quickly to keep up with the action. Now we do get tagged in the back there coming through the bottom hairpin. This caused us to lose a little bit of time to the drivers up ahead, but we were situated in 5th position, hadn't lost any positions, hadn't gained any positions so far, and I was really happy with this. Now throughout each of our 4 heats we did have to include a pit stop, which was a stop-go pit stop, and you'll see later on in the video why this was so significant. But we had to do a pit stop halfway through, or towards the end of the race, wherever we sort of felt like doing a pit stop other than on the first lap. So I was really determined to try and hop into the pits pretty quickly, get out of the pits quickly, and see if we could jump any of the other drivers around us. It added a little element of strategy to the racing. Now the driver that just dipped into the pit lane, who was in 3rd place, we did have Tim, who dropped into the pits there, and I was hoping to try and jump him by having a decent in lap and then coming into the pits myself. Unfortunately, another driver up ahead of us did dip into the pits, so we had to soldier on for another lap. We have moved ourselves up into 3rd position here. Now each of the heats were also 6-minute long. There was no finals, it was just straight heats, and whatever points you managed to get were the points that you finished off on. Now you can see that I'm getting quite scruffy here. We did have a 5-minute practice session at the beginning of the evening, which I have skipped out. But you can see I'm just driving really inconsistently here, getting really hard on the brakes, sort of squirreling all over the place, and it's causing us to lose a lot of time to the other drivers around us, not only to the drivers up ahead, but also to the drivers who had pit behind us as well. Now here I saw a little bit of an opening, so decided to hop into the pits, and you can see that we are now beginning to lose some positions to the drivers around us. So we've got Joseph Simcock behind us there, obviously our Kinetica Racing Team teammate, and we've also got a plethora of drivers up ahead of us. Now after the pit stops had been completed, we had moved ourselves up into 6th place. Perfect time to see Joe pull off a triple switchback going up the ramp. Now obviously everyone had pitted at this point, so we had dropped back behind Joe, but we've also jumped ahead of one of the other drivers that had jumped into the pits. Now fastest lap so far is a 19.537 second lap time, which is a pretty respectable lap time. But now you can see once again we've got Tim up ahead of us here in 5th position. Obviously we wanted to try and get back the position that we started in. We didn't want to sort of find ourselves falling backwards in this one, so really trying to get all over the back of him here. But he is defending quite well, sitting in the middle of the track, checking over his shoulders, and it was really tough to actually find a way through without really trying to force our way into a gap. So you can see here we're right up behind him here as we're coming back up the ramp once again, but unfortunately we're just losing our time on the exits of the corners, and it's just not really allowing us to look for a move down the inside going into some of the hairpins. Again, we come across the line, pretty respectable lap time, pretty consistent with our fastest lap so far, a 19.638, and you can see the drivers up ahead are just sort of going hammer and tongs with one another, and this really is starting to open the door up for Tim to have a little bit of a sniff around. We're also trying to see what sort of areas on the track we can tick off and sort of make a move. So we're coming across the line once again. We are getting compromised by this battle up ahead, but unfortunately you would see here we're trying to get to the outside, look for a switchback. We do bump Tim up the ramp to get past the driver up ahead, and luckily he does sort of get run wide into the wall, which then allows me to use the boost button, slide past him as we come back down the ramp, and we come across the line to finish the first heat in 5th position. Obviously not too happy with this, but we didn't lose any positions from the start. So we're going to jump into the second heat here, and you can see that as we were leaving the pit lane, just trying to use a little bit of a warm-up strategy here, and unfortunately we just completely overcook the rotation on the car and end up facing directly into the wall, which I knew Mr. Jamie Sherman Chase was not going to be too happy with.
Seriously?
So after pushing this sheer amount of embarrassment aside, we did line up in 2nd position for the second heat, which I'm honestly completely clueless as to how the grids were lined up, but this is where we started the second race, and I was determined to try and consolidate this position and hopefully maybe even make a move for first place if the opportunity arose. So my plan for this one was just to work with the driver up ahead of us and try and push away, get ahead, and then have a little battle at the end with one another, just to try and make sure that we weren't sort of holding each other back and pinning each other back. Now we do come into the pits here on this lap, and you can see here on the left hand side that we did in fact pick up a black flag, which did render the pit stop invalid, meaning we had to do it again. Now at the time I didn't quite see that I'd been given a black flag, so continued to drive round in 3rd position, happy as Larry that I was still in a pretty decent position, and hopefully would gain the time back through others' pit stops to maybe even look for first place. You can see here once again we're net P2 at this point, and now we're looking for a switchback to try and make the positions up. We decide to tuck ourselves back in there and look for a better opportunity, but we are down in 3rd place. The driver in 1st has yet to pit, so I decided to, rather than completely fight with the driver up ahead of us, rather just to work with them. And when I saw the driver was in the pit lane, decided to go for a late dive bomb. Unfortunately it didn't quite pay off, and then we sort of get run out wide here from Keelan, who is up behind us here in 3rd place. He's then able to funnel his way through as well. So we're now down into 3rd position without knowing that we did in fact have an invalid pit stop. So we were down in 3rd place and still had to make another pit stop here in this race. Now coming up to the end of the race here, you can see I'm really trying to force an opening and coming up here, running a little bit too hot into the corner there, going into the back of Keelan, who is in 2nd place, and now I'm hoping to try and make some time back on the 2 drivers up ahead of us. Now on the left hand side here, you can see the black flag gets risen up to me once again, and unfortunately for Keelan, he thought that this was for him, so moves out the way there. I was trying to gesture, look over my shoulder here to say, look, it's not for you, it's for me, but unfortunately the damage had already been done, and he was now sat a little bit further back in 3rd position. I then decide to raise my hand here to come into the pits, and we get a huge shunt from behind, almost going straight through each of the parked karts in the pit lane. But as you can see, we have tumbled all the way back into last position, as we have had to do an extra pit stop compared to everyone else, which I was quite disappointed with. And obviously coming around this last couple of corners here, this was in fact the last lap of the race as well, or the heat, so we did in fact finish this second heat in last place, which was a bit gutting. But now we're going to jump into what I thought after this second heat.
I do not believe I went over the line. He's having me on. Not having it.
Mate, I saw you, mate. You're half a car out of it.
No, I wasn't.
Yes, you were.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, alright then.
No, I wasn't.
After finally coming to the understanding in my pit stop that it wasn't the tyres that had to reach the end of the pit box, but instead the whole car, we did have to succumb to the fact that we did finish in last place for the second heat. However, in this one we started in 6th, and I was really determined to try and make our way back through and try and make some positions up that we had lost out on in the second heat. However, unfortunately, I was told from a few little birdies on the side of the track that kart 16 was the worst kart on the night. Now, I wanted to put this all out of my mind, just drive as best I possibly could and see what I could do in it. Now, I noticed pretty quickly coming through the first couple of laps that the kart was extremely understeery. It felt really difficult to tame. I couldn't quite get through the corners as well as I wanted to, and you can see here though, despite this, we have moved ourselves up into 4th place with 2 drivers dipping into the pit lane. But you can see through its bottom hairpin, I'm having to give the kart so much steering lock, and the kart just did not want to rotate. I was really struggling to get the kart through that bottom corner, and also into this last corner here. I was really having to turn in early and really hustle the kart through the corner. You can see I'm now trying to deploy the boost button. The boost button didn't seem to want to be working, so I'm actually bashing on the boost button in the hopes that it will start to come alive and I'll be able to get a bit of extra speed out of the kart. But unfortunately, it just didn't seem to want to work, which is quite annoying. You can see here once again we're coming through the last couple of corners here, and I'm now beginning to tap on the boost button quite aggressively there, hitting it a number of times. It's still just not turning on, not engaging, and I am just staying in the same sort of position to the driver up ahead of us. Now, I was really hoping that despite this, I could put in some clean laps, get some decent lap times in, and again, I'm trying to drive as clean lines as possible, trying to get as close to each of the apexes. But unfortunately, you can see I'm shaking my head now here, succumbing to the fact that the car just didn't really want to work. We did move up into third with the driver dipping into the pit lane, and we have been able to do a 19.6 so far. However, we just weren't getting the power out of the kart that we really needed. And I noticed about halfway through this session that the car decided to slow down a little bit. We did have a little bit of a tangle here with Blake, who was forcing his way through after his pit stop. He did receive a give back position flag, so I was then able to move back up into third. And I thought I'd be quite nice in this scenario and actually wave Blake Black through once again, as I just thought I was just going to hold him up. There's not really much point in me racing him, as I knew he had a lot more pace than me throughout each of the other laps. You can see here through the last couple of corners how much more speed he's getting on exit. Now, with this in mind, I decided to waste no more time, come into the pit stop and perform a successful pit stop this time, coming out of the pit lane in 5th position ahead of some of the other drivers up behind me. But I noticed as I came out the pits that the kart was extremely sluggish coming up the ramp. It felt like it was in speed 3. I didn't know what was going on here, and I was getting really frustrated. You can see I'm really trying to urge the kart back down the ramp. Even coming down the start finish straight here, you can visibly see how much slower the kart is. I'm really jamming on the boost button in the hopes that something will happen with it, but you can see here I'm staying more to the middle of the track now, trying to defend. Getting the kart rotated, it's still not rotating, and we have half the speed of anyone else on track right now. Getting really annoyed, trying to do anything I can to get back in this race. We're down to 6th position once again, which is where we started this race, and even down the straight once again I'm trying to urge the kart forward as much as I can. We're 2 seconds slower than our fastest lap of this heat so far, and I knew that the kart had pretty much given up the ghost at this point. Coming up the ramp once again, me being a heavy boy at around 90 kilos at the moment, you can see how much time that has cost us coming up and back down the ramp once again, and I was getting really frustrated now as there was absolutely nothing I could do. I was just driving the tightest lines I possibly could, and I knew at this point it was going to be a time for consolidation. So you can see here for the last couple of laps I'm really trying to pin the car as tight to each of the apexes as I could, trying to take the shortest line around the track that I could, staying to right hand side coming down the ramp, tucking ourselves really tight, flicking it to the left and then back to the right down the main straight here, in the hopes that the driver would have to force their way around the outside of us through the first couple of corners, and again down the inside of the bottom hairpin, trying to stay as tight as possible, leaving no sort of gap on the inside, allowing us to sort of cover off any dive bombs that were going to become unexpected to us. And again through the last couple of corners we're staying really tight. We can see a checkered flag, we're urging ourselves forward, and luckily we're able to get across the line to beat the drivers behind us in 7th and 8th. But this did render us in 6th position once again, and with this in mind it does lead us into our last heat of the day, which saw us start in 2nd place once again, which I was quite confused about. Now obviously this was the last heat of the day. We started in 2nd place, and I was hoping to try and keep in 2nd for this one, or maybe even go for 1st ahead of Tim, who is up ahead of us and has started in pole position. Now obviously on the night this was in fact the final round of the championship that these guys have all been competing in for the last couple of months, so I didn't want to come in here and ruin it, as I knew that Keelan was also in this heat with us, and Tim and Keelan were in direct competition with one another, so I didn't want to go wiping anyone out, didn't want to go ruin anyone's day, so I decided to just sit in behind Tim. And unfortunately there you can just see through that bottom corner the kart just comes away from me completely, and we lose about half a second to Tim up ahead of us. And I wasn't doing anything different compared to any of the other laps that I'd done throughout the night, but I don't know if the kart just slipped where the grip levels on the different areas of the surface changed, but it just lost us so much time, and I didn't know why that happened. I was quite confused, but that was one of the main reasons that I was just stuck down behind him for a majority of the race. You can see we've been overtaken by 2 drivers here who are having a battle with one another as we come out of the pits, but luckily we're able to squeeze our way back through to push ourselves back up into 2nd place where we started the race. So we haven't actually lost out anything from completing our pit stops, and actually some of the drivers behind us in 3rd and 4th hadn't actually pit yet, so we did have a bit of a gap from some of the other drivers behind us. And I also knew that Tim up ahead of us had also not pit yet, so I knew that these laps were extremely crucial in order to catch up to him and just get a good result. Now what you are watching here, or the end of, is my fastest lap of the evening. You can see we come across the line with a 19.317, which I was really happy with, especially as I've mentioned my weight already, being quite a heavy driver. To have this lap time, I was quite impressed with it, and obviously we had to do it at the end of the last session where the track was warm. We'd sort of done quite a few laps now at this point, but unfortunately for the rest of the session we just weren't able to improve on this, and I think this was just due to us being slightly inconsistent, obviously not having much track time at the track. I was just making a few mistakes on the brakes, sort of turning in a bit too early through some of the corners, missing some of the apexes, and ultimately that just cost us the crucial couple of attempts that we did need in this one to really catch up to Tim, who has now hopped into his pit stop, I believe. Yet there he comes out of the pits up ahead of us, but we do come across the line on our last lap with a 19.338, which is only 200ths off our fastest lap, but due to this being such a short lap time, every single bit of the track and every bit of time really is crucial. So you can see here we're coming through the last couple of corners once again in the hopes that we can try and sort of rip off another couple of attempts from Tim, hoping that he makes a few mistakes up ahead by taking some narrow lines. But unfortunately you can see here he's just got such a decent gap to us that it was really going to be a bit of a task to catch up to him, as we are pretty equal throughout the whole heat. Coming into the last couple of corners once again through the chicane section here, really trying to straight line the corner as much as possible, and then coming across the line once again 2 tenths down on our previous lap with a 19.565, which is obviously a little bit slower than what we've been able to do as our quickest lap so far. Coming around the top section of the track once again, trying to take as tight a line as possible, flicking the kart through the last couple of corners once again, trying to straight line these chicane as much as we can. And to our surprise here, we come across the line once again with a 19.374, and actually Tim was beginning to get held up here by one of the back markers. I was hoping that with this in mind we were going to be able to send a bit of a move coming into the last couple of corners here, as I wasn't aware that this was in fact the last lap of the race. Unfortunately we are hitting the boost button, but we don't quite have the overspeed to get past him, so we finished the last heat in second position. A really good fun race, and we did finish very close to Tim, who finished in first place. However, this does in fact bring us to the end of the video, guys, so I hope you have all enjoyed it. If you have, can you please leave a like on the video down below, as I really do appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel, as it really does help me out. As always, down below in the description of the video is my link tree, which holds all of the social medias that I run, so feel free to check those out for more updates. We've got a lot of events coming up very soon, but in the meantime, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.